Thank you for being here once again. First, I'd like to thank Disal for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you today. I'm Paula, as you can see in my presentation, yes. I work at Cultura Inglesa, São Paulo, as an academic coordinator. And today we're going to talk a little bit about CLIL and the virtual environment, okay, and why this can be a good match or a perfect match, okay. All right, so let's get going. So here's my contact info, but again, I'll show you my contact info again at the end of the presentation, in case you'd like to get in touch with me, okay. Okay, guys, so first things first, I know that this webinar is also being streamed on Facebook, and I don't have a Facebook account, so I'm not able to see what you guys are commenting or if you want to ask questions on Facebook. So this is a channel you can use. I'd like to encourage you to use this. So if you're watching this webinar on the platform, then you can use the chat box, okay? But if you're watching this on Facebook, then you can go ahead and scan the code, okay, the QR code, or type in the link, so gg.gg/CLIL webinar, and then you should be able to see a Mentimeter page, okay? We'll be using Mentimeter, so you can contribute, ask your questions, and let me know what you're thinking, okay? And also, I'd like to encourage you to really participate. I know this is, it's kind of hard because we have the chat box and then I can actually hear you, but feel free to post your comments, okay? And then let me know if the Mentimeter is working, okay? And then if it's not, let me know and we can do something about it, all right? Okay, guys, so, second. Okay, so I'd like to start by talking about what we're going to cover in this webinar. Oh yes, hey, thank you. I got something here on the Mentimeter. Hello from Assis. So thank you for letting me know it's working. Okay. So what's on the agenda today? We are going to begin by talking a little bit about what CLIL is, okay? Some of the theory behind CLIL, some important aspects we have to take into consideration. However, we won't delve into theory that much, okay? We're gonna have a bird's eye view of what CLIL is and how we can use CLIL as teachers, okay? We're also going to talk a little bit about the virtual environment and how we can associate CLIL and online lessons or not only online lessons, but the internet, yeah? And then we're gonna look into how you can plan your CLIL lessons or tasks that you want to do that sort of follow the CLIL mindset, yeah. And then finally, we're gonna have a hands-on moment, yeah. I plan for us to have some time at the end of the presentation for questions and answers, okay? So if we have the time, yeah, at the end. But also, guys, I'd like to encourage you to ask your questions during the presentation as well, okay? And if by any chance, if I miss anything, then you can ask me again at the end, all right? So let's get going. Okay, so, guys, we know CLIL stands for Content and Language Integrated Learning, right? And we usually begin our CLIL presentations by asking participants what CLIL means, right? What CLIL stands for. So I'm giving you the definition here, yes, the acronym definition. But what else? And now I'd like to hear a little bit from you, yes? So what else do you know about CLIL? You can post your comments here in the chat box, or you can use Mentimeter. What else is there about CLIL? Yes. Beyond the definition of what it is, of what it means. Yeah. Good, Maria. Yes. Big picture to specifics. We have Fabielli. Thank you, Fabi. The C's. Yes, we're going to talk about the C's. Victor, thank you. Integrating culture with our context. Exactly. Thank you, Gustavo. Rosemary didn't know. Great, Rosie. So we've learned something new already. That's wonderful. Yes, an interdisciplinary way of learning something. Yes, exactly. Learning new things through a foreign language. Yes, or second language. Good, Carolina. Thank you. Okay, Clady. Thank you so much. Okay, so guys, yes, so all your contributions are correct, yes, and I think it's sometimes hard for us to define what CLIL is because we have myriad definitions, to be honest, right? So let's have a look at some of the things we can consider when talking about CLIL. Okay. So the first thing, guys, is CBI. Are you aware of what CBI is? Have you ever heard of it? So CBI stands for content-based instruction, okay? Content-based instruction. And in a way, it's very similar to what CLIL is, right? So it's integrating content into what we do in the classroom, okay? Language as a medium of learning is also another possible name, or something that is similar to what we're going to talk about today as CLIL. Yeah, we know that in CLIL lessons, the English language is a medium, right? It's a tool we use because learners are learning English and learning new content through English, right? And then we can also think about ESP and EAP. So English for specific purposes, right? And English for academic purposes as well. So again, when we talk about specific purposes, then there could be some CLIL to it because we're talking about content, okay? Also, when we are defining what CLIL is, or better yet, not defining, but when we want to understand what CLIL is, we have to think about our classroom, right? We have a lot of different contexts in Brazil. So when we talk about the Brazilian reality, yes, we have different educational contexts, and I'm sure that this is also different from one country to the other. And then within each country, we have different contexts, right? So for instance, if you're here from Brazil, you know that we have language schools, yes, in which we teach English, but we also have mainstream education, right? We have regular schools. And these contexts are very different, right, from each other. So we have bilingual schools, we have international schools, and then again, international schools are different from bilingual programs that regular schools oftentimes offer their learners, right? So this is one more reason why defining what CLIL is sometimes problematic, because the way I use CLIL in my lessons in a language institute is going to be different from the way other teachers can use CLIL in regular schools, right, with their learners, okay? Also, guys, something I'd like a point I'd like to raise here, and this is a question that I often ask myself, and maybe this is going to be something that we're going to see throughout this webinar today is, okay, we're talking about CLIL as integrating content and language, right? But is it possible for us teachers to disassociate content and language? Yes, I'd like you to think about that. So even if we're not talking about CLIL, do we teach the language in itself? Yes, is that possible? Or do we need some sort of content when we're teaching a language? Yes. Okay, so because we have all these different educational contexts, we also have different types of CLIL. So in here, we're going to have a look at what we call soft CLIL and hard CLIL, okay? So two variations of CLIL. And as you can see, I decided to use this sort of continuum for you to see how we can go from soft CLIL to hard CLIL. And there are a lot of different places in between soft and hard, okay? So when we talk about soft CLIL, we're focusing on language-driven classes or lessons or activities, okay? So the focus in a soft CLIL lesson or activity is the language. So for us, English, right? We're focusing on the English language, okay? So when I teach a lesson and I'm using soft CLIL, I have language objectives. So I want my learners to learn maybe a new verb tense, maybe new vocabulary. We're gonna work on grammar. I don't know, we're gonna work on discourse, okay? So there are clear language objectives, okay? And the content, I wrote here that content is incidental. By incidental, I mean that content is sort of secondary, right? So we, of course, we teach content, yeah, but the content is sort of an excuse for us to get to the language objective or the language goal. Does that make sense? Yes? I'm just having a look at your comments here. Yes, Jen, yes, okay. Yes, all right. So also, so talking again about the soft CLIL, right? Let's continue talking about soft CLIL. So students are evaluated on content and language, right? So you assess students on both, and oftentimes more on language, yeah? And an example of a soft CLIL lesson or activity is when we use a course book in the classroom and we give it a spin, right? We add CLIL elements to a regular lesson. That would be soft CLIL, okay? And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have hard CLIL. So content is priority, okay? So students are actually evaluated on their knowledge and mastery of the content, okay? So think about an international school where students learn science in English, right? 100% of the time. So there's no division between mother tongue, Portuguese, or any other language, and English. Everything is taught in English. So then the priority is content, okay? And language takes a secondary position, okay? And as you can see, I'm giving you an example of international schools curricula, yeah? So language is a means to learning content or school subjects in this case, okay? Guys, so far, is this definition or the difference between soft CLIL and hard CLIL clear? Yes, to everybody. Also, think about what type of CLIL you use or you can use in your context, right? So as teachers, would you be maybe leaning towards soft or hard? Yes, so think about that as well, okay? Okay, so another very famous or important aspect of CLIL, and some of you have already mentioned this here in the chat box, are the 4 C's, okay? Or what is known as the 4 C's framework, okay? Do you guys remember what the 4 C's are? Or does anybody know what the 4 C's are? You can add your comments here to the chat box. Any ideas? Let's see if we have anybody. Communication, okay. Creativity, oh, good guess. Critical thinking. Yes, Silvana. Silvana got it. Well done, Silvana. Okay, so yeah, when we're talking about the 4 C's, we're referring to content, communication, cognition, and culture. Okay, so these are the 4 C's, COIL's 4 C's. By the way, guys, I have a list of reference in the books and websites I use to put this presentation together at the end of the presentation. Okay, so you get to know the authors. Okay. Okay, so content, communication, cognition, and culture. So what are the benefits of using CLIL in the classroom? Yes, there are plenty of benefits to using the CLIL methodology or approach. Yes, one of the benefits is that language is actually meaningful, right? So again, if we're teaching content, there is meaning in language there, right? It's meaningful. You need the language to teach the content. It's also relevant. And again, we cannot take this for granted. Yes, we have to consider what our learners' interests and needs are in order for the lesson to be relevant, right? And then also context plays a big role because we have a clear context. So for instance, you're teaching art. There is a context, right? So language is not just lost and decontextualized there, okay? One the other benefit we can have when adopting the CLIL methodology is developing cognitive and thinking skills, and we're gonna take a look at this in a minute, okay? Also building community, right? Oftentimes, guys, and now I'm not talking about regular schools, but I'm talking about possibilities that there are if you look at groups online of different communities who want to learn something new. So, for instance, if you think of the gaming industry, right, and how learners engage in playing games and learning English through games, right? So you have a strong community there as well, yeah. And in my experience, when we use this in the classroom, you see that those bonds emerging, right? The students engage, they want to participate because they are part of this community. Something else that actually happens sometimes, and I don't know if you've had this experience, is that when we're teaching another subject in English, students have a lot to teach us. They always do, right? But in some cases, so for instance, when you're teaching a group of business people, they know the jargon, yeah, they're familiar with the terms, right? And then teaching English, in that case, you end up learning a lot, yes, in terms of terminology and the content itself, right? Okay, so let's have a look at what the 4 C's are in more detail, okay? So the first one is content. So by content, we mean curricular subjects. So when we talk about regular schools, curricular subjects such as math, science, art, history, geography, philosophy, you name it, yeah? But not only subjects, not only school subjects, but also knowledge, right? So the content itself, so progression in knowledge. So when you think of, for instance, history, but then you have the different topics within a history lesson, yes? And then you have content there, different content. So this is also what we consider to be content, yeah? And when I add sequence here, guys, in parentheses, what do I mean by sequence? We know that when we teach a language, we don't necessarily need to teach the simple present and then the present continuous, right? I know lots of schools teach this way. We oftentimes end up teaching in a certain order because of course books, right? Or the school syllabus. But that doesn't mean that I cannot teach the past simple to a learner that hasn't yet mastered the present simple, right? So what do I mean by this? Learning a language is not linear, right? We can develop skills in different ways and in different orders. Yes, does that make sense? However, when we are learning school subjects such as math, for instance, there is a sequence, right? Because you cannot solve an equation if you haven't learned how to add and multiply and etc. Yeah. So then the sequence of content is also very important. Yes, very important. So we have to take that into consideration as well. Okay. So far, so good, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Yes, I'm checking the chat box here. Okay. Okay. All right, so let's continue. So the next C is communication. And by communication, in a CLIL lesson, you can, such as in any other lesson, you can develop the 4 language skills, right? So the productive and receptive skills. So productive skills, speaking and writing. Yes, receptive skills, reading and listening. Yeah. So in a CLIL lesson, you can develop all of these skills as well. Yeah. And when we talk about communication, we also need to focus on language. Yeah. We have to focus a lot on language. Yeah. And I'm going to focus a little bit on language in the next slide. Okay. Also, CLIL lessons, guys, they foster a lot of interaction. I don't know if you have experience delivering CLIL lessons or adopting CLIL in your schools, in your classrooms, but when we design a CLIL activity or a CLIL task, there is a lot of interaction among learners, right? And this is one of the benefits. Also, when we talk about communication, we can consider TTT or teaching talking time and STT, so student talking time. Yeah. In CLIL lessons, especially when you have a project, yeah, so learners are working on a geography project, you can step back, right? You step back, and then they have to step up in their groups and work on their projects, and this increases student talking time. Okay. All right, so now this is a very important concept for us, especially when we're planning our lessons, okay? The language triptych. Are you familiar with the language triptych? So again, I'm talking about COIL, okay? The guy who gives us lots of info on CLIL, okay? So just have a look at the language triptych, yes? As you can see, we have sort of a pyramid or a triangle there. And then now we're going to talk about the 3 different perspectives we have on language in CLIL lessons. Yes, so we have language of learning, language for learning, and language through learning. Okay? Any idea of what these are? Have you heard about this before? Maybe you can share some insights with us. What do they mean? Okay, so let's have a look at what they mean. Okay, so guys, language of learning. When we talk about language of learning in a CLIL lesson, we're talking about the target language, right? So the language learners need to deal or to cope with the content, Okay, so I have some examples here for you. So content words, word lists, terminology, the target language, right? And this can be vocabulary, it can be grammar, okay? So it's not only vocabulary, yeah? So for instance, if you're teaching history, you might need narrative tenses, right? Learners may need narrative tenses or past tenses. Yeah, just an example, right? Then you have language for learning. So language for learning is the language that students need to cope with the tasks. Does that make sense? So language of learning, content. Language for learning, tasks. Yeah? So how can they ask for information in English? How can they agree? How can they check comprehension? How can they justify their answers? How can they give examples, right? And then this is language for learning, okay? And then language through learning is incidental or emergent language. So this is the language that we don't prepare for, right? We may, of course, anticipate language through learning, but this is the language that happens in the classroom. So it comes from students, yes? And it's important that we think about this when planning our lessons so that we help our learners, right? We give them the right amount of preparation. Yes, we scaffold the learning process. We give them support. Yeah, because we know it's hard enough to learn a new language. Can you imagine learning, equations in English, right? So then students need to be given enough language so that they can cope with tasks in the classroom. Okay? All right, the next C, cognition. So when we talk about cognition, we're talking about thinking skills, yes? So the thinking skills involved in learning content and learning and using language, right? So this is something else that's very important for us to take into account when using CLIL or planning a lesson using CLIL methodology, the CLIL methodology, right? And something that comes in handy at this time is Bloom's taxonomy. Very popular. Yeah, this is very popular. We've seen this before. I'm sure some of you know what Bloom's taxonomy is, right? Bloom's taxonomy focuses on HOTS and LOTS. So higher order thinking skills and lower order thinking skills, okay? But what do we mean by higher order thinking skills and lower order thinking skills? So here's an example. I found this image. This is very easy for you to find, guys. Also, I'd like to encourage you to have this because it's very helpful, very useful when we're planning our lessons. Yes, to have this image of Bloom's taxonomy, especially this version, because this version brings us verbs, and these verbs are excellent, very helpful, very helpful. So when we talk about HOTS and LOTS, so higher order and lower order, when you look at the pyramid, so what you have at the bottom, lower order thinking skills, right? So in theory, less complex, right? Easier for students to master. As you move up the pyramid, then you have higher order thinking skills. So thinking processes and skills that are more complex, yes, more intricate, yeah. And then as you can see in the slides there, you have verbs. So for instance, when we want learners to remember something, yes, they have to recall facts and basic concepts. So memorize, repeat, state, duplicate, yeah. When we want learners to analyze something, then the verbs you can use when preparing your lesson or preparing tasks are compare, contrast, examine, question, organize, differentiate, yeah? And then create, design, develop, formulate. So see, so it's much more complex, right? It's much more complex for learners to hypothesize, yeah, than to classify or define, yeah? Much more complex, okay? Okay, and then last but not least, the final C, the last C is culture. Yeah, so by culture, we mean cultural awareness. This can be self-awareness. Yeah, it can be awareness of different cultures, different countries, different cultures within the same country. Yeah, also a sense of global citizenship and belonging, right? Depending on the context, right? So if you're talking about international schools, they even follow for instance, the American school calendar, school year, right? So this is also something that is related to culture, yeah? And then finally, connectivity. So this is where we begin talking a little bit about the virtual environment, okay? And the connection between the virtual environment and CLIL. All right, so what are the benefits of the virtual environment, guys? So I'd like you to start thinking about it. So how can we use the internet? How can we use the virtual environment to help us plan and prepare and include CLIL in our lessons? So you can share some ideas, okay? Let's see if we have something here. Mentimeter. Okay. So yes, so thank you, Diana. So making classes more interactive, definitely. We have the world in our hands, definitely, Carol. The classes are different. Yeah, so you add this element of something new, right? There's novelty to it, maybe, right? 24/7 access, thank you. Visual aids, thank you, Ka. Collaborative learning, exactly. Great, guys. So let's have a look at some of the things I mentioned here, but definitely everything that you're saying is great, yeah? So basically, the internet can make our lives easier, right? Our lives easier, yeah? So you have easy access to authentic and non-authentic materials. Are you guys familiar with these terms? Yeah, so authentic materials, things that were not created or designed to be used with learners of the language, right? So things that are real, like videos, podcasts, news articles, magazines, and you name it, right? So on and so forth. But also non-authentic materials. There are lots of great non-authentic materials already prepared by teachers of different countries that we can use as well, and it's so easy to find online, right? And then I'm giving you some examples. So videos, podcasts, tutorials, articles, books, etc., etc., etc. Yes. Also, the virtual environment gives us a variety of tools and resources, right? I'm sure that now with the pandemic, I believe all of us, yes, especially here in Brazil, we're all teaching from home. Yes, some of us are actually teaching lessons online, right? Others are sending students extra materials and having to engage students somehow. Yeah, and I think this is a good opportunity for us to learn how to use different tools, right? We have to add this variety, even for those of us who are not as tech savvy. I myself am not an expert on technology, but there are so many tools that can help us, right? Teaching our learners. And one more thing I'd like to emphasize, guys, is that what we're covering here, what we're talking about today, does not necessarily apply to lessons online only. No, we can use this whatever the situation. Yes. So hopefully when things go back to normal and we can hug our learners again, these are things you can use with your groups in your regular classes. Okay. All right. So what are the resources you use? I'd like to hear from you a little bit. Can you share? Can you share in the chat box or maybe share on Mentimeter? What are the resources you use? So these can be apps, these can be gadgets, these can be websites. Great. Video clips, TV ads, word wall, great. Kahoot, TV shows, TED Ed. Yes, we're going to talk about some of them. Padlet, exactly. Lyrics training. The Google Suite, right? So Forms, great. I can see here some websites too that you use. Awesome, guys. Oh, take notes, right? So as your participants are sharing some very interesting things here. Great. Moodle, Google Classroom, podcasts, SurveyMonkey. Yes, awesome. SurveyMonkey surveys, guys. Conducting a survey. This is CLIL, right? This is CLIL. Amazing. Okay. So now let's focus a little bit on how you can plan a CLIL lesson. And by CLIL lesson, I mean a whole lesson, or you can also consider parts of a lesson, okay? So first thing you have to take into account the 4 C's, right? So as you're planning your lesson, what are you going to cover in terms of content? What are you going to cover in terms of communication, cognition, and culture, yeah? Do you have to have all 4 C's at the same time in every lesson or in every task? In my opinion, and again, this is personal, okay? In my opinion, you don't, okay? Sometimes you have the subject or the topic will lend itself much more useful to foster a discussion on culture. But sometimes it might be difficult to draw a parallel between the topic you're teaching and culture. Again, it will depend on the content, yes. It will depend on your objective, yes, and what you want to focus on, okay. But I would encourage you or advise you to always take into consideration cognition, guys. I think that this is the trick about CLIL. Yes, thinking about the cognitive processes, the thinking skills that students require. Yes, and I believe that this is a plus. Right? This is a plus. I think that we tend to forget about this. Yes, not only in CLIL lessons, but we usually tend to follow, I don't know, a course book, and we don't really think, how can I make this more engaging cognitively, right? How can I make this more or less challenging, right? And then that's where you can use Bloom's taxonomy to help you gauge, the level of challenge. So, okay, you've considered the 4 C's, right? Then look at language of and for. Again, I haven't included language through here, just because language through is emergent language, right? So language that students come up with, right? However, this does not mean that language through learning is not important, okay? Oftentimes, language through learning is the richest thing you have in the lesson, yeah? So my idea here of including only of and for, things you should focus before the lesson, right? For language through, you can anticipate what might come up. Again, you won't be able to guess everything, right? You won't know. However, once language through happens, you can definitely work on this language through, right? You can stretch language, you can give learners feedback on this emergent language. Don't just ignore it, yeah? Okay, and then adapting and personalizing according to level and age. So when we're talking about CLIL, we're not only focusing on young learners, okay? We're not only talking about children. We can use CLIL with teenagers, young adults, right? CLIL does not relate to children only, okay? So making sure that you adapt materials and you personalize according to the age group you're teaching and the level, right? The CFR level. Are they basic learners, intermediate, advanced, proficient? Yes? This is also something we have to take into account. All right, so we're gonna get to the practical part, and then we might have 5 minutes at the end for questions, okay? So how can we put CLIL into practice in the virtual environment? We're gonna have a hands-on moment now, guys. And for each of the tasks or activities I show you, I'd like you to consider. So bear in mind the 4 C's: language of, for, and through, age group and level, preparation and personalization. Okay, so let's do the first one together. Have a look at this, guys. So this is a picture, okay? So the material I'm using here to have CLIL in my lesson is a photo of something that happened. Yeah, this is authentic. Are you guys familiar with this? This is a work of art by Banksy. Yes, Marina, exactly. And then this went for auction, right? And then as soon as the buyer bought it, it began to be shredded, yeah? Okay, so have a look at the picture. I'm using this with my learners. What are the 4 C's? How would you use this? How would you transform this into a CLIL lesson? What is the content? What is the subject here? Can you write for me? Can you add to the chat box? What is the content you could work on? Think of school subjects. So for instance, art, yeah? It could be art. Any other subjects you can think of? History, yes. Wow, biology, interesting, right? So again, you can decide how you're going to contemporary art. You can decide how you could use this, right? What subject you're tackling, right? So then when we think content, what type of language? So what type of vocabulary? So if I'm focusing on art, what type of vocabulary? So maybe different types of, exactly, exhibitions, museums, different types of art. Thank you, Ney. Colors, shapes, materials, exactly. Thank you, guys. Adjectives, frame, perfect, yeah. What about cognition? Then for you to think of cognition, you have to think of a task, right? So do I want my learners to report, to explain, to hypothesize? Maybe they don't know what happened. They want to hypothesize, right? This would be a type of cognition. Describing the picture, exactly, right? Great. And then culture. Yeah, maybe what could you tackle in terms of culture? Yes, Fabi, thank you. This is an option. Maybe in terms of culture, comparing artists. So Banksy is from England, right? Maybe finding a counterpart, maybe in your own country or in Brazil or wherever you're from, right? Exactly, researching Banksy's work, or maybe talking about graffiti. Is graffiti art? Is graffiti? So what do you think? Is it art? Is it not art? This would be culture, yeah? What about, guys, the age group and the level? What do you think? Children, teens, adults, teens and up? Good, Carolina, thank you. Young adults, yes. Any, thank you, Natalia. Any, right? So it's all going to depend on how you plan the activity, right? Okay, and then, guys, preparation. So again, in terms of language, maybe you need to prepare. You have to pre-teach some vocabulary. Yes, if you want learners to learn vocabulary related to art, maybe pre-teaching chunks of language. Maybe you want to have a debate whether this is art or not art. So then teaching discourse markers, teaching, yeah, so then you have to think about consider the vocabulary and grammar you need, or learners need to perform this task, right? And then personalizing, I think this is key as well, guys. So how can you make that personal? How can you make that unique to your group? Yes, maybe they could come up with a piece of a drawing, or they could draw and then shred part of what they've done, right? And again, this doesn't have to, it doesn't have to do with being online, right? This can be done. So we're using a picture that I got online, but this can be done in the classroom using paper, materials, realia, what you have, yes, at your disposal, yeah? Okay, can we do one more? Let's do one more. All right. I want to show you this one first. What about this one? Can you share your ideas? Again, think about the 4 C's. Think about language. What type of language? How would you have to prepare learners here? Just so you know, guys, this is a video, okay? So the idea here was that the teacher could play the video, so learners would watch the video. So in this case, when we're talking about language, we are considering the different skills. Yeah, so listening. So maybe in this case, you would have to tackle pronunciation to help learners to be able to hear and understand, right? I think we can sort of assume that this would be for children. Yes, children in school. Exactly, Marina. So listening, pronunciation, vocabulary. Yes. 3rd grade. Thank you, Ka. Listing. Very good, Natalia. So we could talk about habitats, endangered species. Great. And then you're getting into culture. Yeah. So what are do we have this, and do you have these animals in your country? Yes. Are these common animals in your country? What about animals you have in your country, right? Where would they go? Again, cognition. So what do we want learners to do? We want them to memorize only, or do we want them to maybe classify, right? And then we're working up the Bloom taxonomy pyramid, yeah? Okay, great. One more example, guys, I have here for you. So this is a website I found. You can see the link here is windy.app/coronavirus map. Just so you know, I'm not going to share my screen now, but if you want to have a look at this website, this is interactive. So as you click or as you move the mouse, you can see the numbers, right? The cases, the coronavirus cases in different countries. And then just below this, you see a graph, right? Exactly, Natalia. Wonderful. So we look at the map and we think geography, right? Because, yeah, but also math, right? If we're talking about, if we use a graph and then we want learners to see the progression, right? Of cases. Anthropology, amazing. Again, vocabulary, yes. Cognition. What could you do in terms of cognition? Um, what about level? What about level, guys? Do you think learners could we use this with basic learners, elementary learners, or intermediate? B2, good. Thank you, Gabi. Okay, young adults and adults, good. Guys, also a way that you could perhaps personalize this is having students, and maybe why not children, yeah, why not your learners, because our learners our learners who are children, they're also facing this situation, right? They're home, they cannot go to schools. What you could do, for instance, is transform this into a timeline. So students would have to create their quarantine timeline. So this, what has this experience been like for you, right? So, and then they have to use a timeline to explain when, oh, okay, this day was my last day at school, and then this day my teacher began teaching me online, right? And then when I began doing homework, and etc., etc. So the quarantine routine, yes, Gislaine, right? Writing a journal, exactly. Exactly. So when we talk about personalizing, guys, I'd like you to keep this in mind. We have the website, we have videos, we have podcasts, but how can I, what other media can I use? Yeah. To have my learners working on the topic and working, with cognition and communication and so on, right? Exactly, Maíra. Thank you, Maíra. And this is culture. Yeah. So how did we? What is Brazil doing during the coronavirus pandemic? And how is Australia or Japan or China handling the pandemic? Right. This is culture. Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I have time to show you one more example. Okay. This is the last example I have to show you guys. So I don't know if you're familiar with TED Ed. Are you familiar with TED Ed? We have TED Talks, right? TED Talks. TED Ed is really helpful if you want to find materials for CLIL lessons, especially because oftentimes when we teach CLIL lessons, we have to learn vocabulary, right? So first, we have to understand what we're talking about. I remember once a student of mine wanted to watch a video on laundering money. I have no idea how to launder money. Yes, to this day I cannot understand the concept of laundering money. So we have to learn the content first. Yes, I'm sure you've had this experience. Maybe you're not a math person, but you have to teach math in English or parts of math components in your English lessons, right? So the TED Ed is a website where you find videos, very useful videos. I had uploaded the video here, but it's not going to work. But just go on Google, type TED Ed, as you can see there. The videos are divided in categories, so you can easily find videos on history, technology, you name it. Okay. Guys, how about this one for us to begin to wrap things up? How do you build a tunnel underwater? What sort of subject is this? What content is this? Thank you, Renata. Math, physics, engineering, precisely, Marinês. Engineering. Yes, Barbara, good. Yes, exactly. What about language? Yes. What about the level? How proficient do you think learners would have to be? Again, remember that this is a video, right? So they would watch, they would listen. Um, thank you, Ayana. Yes, exactly. Intermediate adults, exactly. All right. Good. What sort of preparation? What sort of preparation could you do with learners before they watch the video? Or how could you personalize this and make it more, even more meaningful to learners? Any other ideas? We could talk about the subject a class before. Yes, Renata. Yes, Monica. Good. A good tip here. Yes, talk about maybe transportation systems or go over vocabulary. Thank you, Jane. Brainstorm. Yes. And again, you can use different visual aids, right? So maybe a word cloud, a mind map. Good. So they could use recycled material. Yeah. Very good. Yes, that's it, guys. I'm afraid we're running out of time. I have about 3 minutes. So I'd like to hear from you. Do you have any questions? If any, I don't know if we're gonna have a lot of time. Again, if you have questions that I can't answer now, please feel free to write me an email. Yes. I really hope. Thank you, Marina, so much. Thank you. Yes, I really hope that this was useful. I know that it was quite a lot, right? Unfortunately, we don't have time to go that deep into the theory and other aspects. I want to remind you that these are some aspects of CLIL, okay? They are not everything. There's so much more that you can study about, and especially online, there are lots and lots of materials available for us teachers, yeah? Any other questions? Let's see if, okay, just a second. I'm trying to, okay, books, yes. I have some books. I have the list of the material. I have a reference list of the materials I use, but some of the books I use. This is one, okay? Integrating language and content. This is another one. Putting CLIL into practice. Okay. If you're interested in receiving this presentation, write me an email, okay? Let me show you the reference here. So this is a list of the books and websites I used. Again, please feel free to send me an email if you want to receive this presentation, okay? Then you have the list. You can check the presentation again. Yes. Yes, and let me show you my email. I have just one more reminder, guys, before I show you my contact info again. As you know, I work at Cultura Inglesa São Paulo. Yes, and at Faculdade Cultura Inglesa, we have courses related to CLIL. So I'd like to share this with you in case you're interested. We have a TKT CLIL prep course. This is an extension course, right? Curso de extensão universitária, okay? So you get a certificate for extensão universitária. This is an option, right? If you're interested, have a look at our website. You can also send us an email at atendimento@facultinglesa.com.br. There are other courses you can have a look at. And also, I'd like to let you know that we're offering some courses free of charge, yes, as well, okay? And then this is my email address, okay? I can see some of you are giving me your email address, so let me just rephrase, make sure we're on the same page. Please write me an email, okay, in case you want to receive the PowerPoint presentation. In case you have questions, feel free to write to me, okay, guys? My email address is paula.piccolo@culturainglesasp.com.br. You can also find me on LinkedIn, so we can keep in touch, yeah? Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your questions and comments. I really hope this was helpful. Very happy to be here with you. Thank you, Disal, for this opportunity. And I'll keep in touch. We'll keep in touch, right? Write me, yeah? Bye, guys. Thank you.